The podcast that floats down here.
Hi, I'm Melissa, your Stephen King veteran.
Hi, I'm Ben, the Stephen King and horror film fanboy.
And hello, I'm Luke, your first-time Stephen King reader. All right, we are here kicking off part 5, entitled The Ritual of Chud. This is chapter number 19. We are doing sections 1 through 3. This chapter is entitled In the Watches of the Night. Section 1 is the Derry Public Library, 1:15 a.m. Part 2, section 2, is Lower Main Street, 11:30 a.m. And section 3 is the Derry Public Library, 1:55 a.m. So this chapter as a whole is 84 pages long, and that's 7.71% of this book. So pretty meaty chapter, which is, as we described last time, why we basically broke it up into sections of 3. I think there's 12 sections total in this chapter. So we'll be on chapter 9 for the next 4 episodes. This section alone is 27 pages, and that is 2.48% of the entire book. All right, so we're clearly in a new part of this book. Lots going on. Melissa, I'm gonna kick it off to you here in section 1.
So I feel like the most important thing that happens in the first section is that their hands start bleeding and they reform their circle. To me, that's sort of I had to pick the main event of section 1. That's what I would call it. And I think it's really interesting that their hands just start gushing.
Right, and this was
spontaneously
before they encircle. That was like the, hey, we're breaking apart, and that starts happening just spontaneously, right?
Yes, but then they form the circle, and like that's like the crux of this particular section.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, certainly I think this is a big part of whatever this ritual is. You know, this is them going their separate ways almost here this night, and the last time that they were all together is when they cut their hands. So I think that could be pretty telling for sure. Benji, what jumped out to you in this chapter?
Yeah, so well, going to that point really quick, the power of the scars opening and the occurrences when the circle closed, you have to wonder, was that it causing them to open up and enclose the circle, or the turtle, the other? Because we get the descriptions of a half grin and a half grimace from Mike, possibly both fighting to get into them. That's just one thing that I keep coming back to, because as you said, as the circle is breaking up, something drew them back to have to reconnect. So it could be Pennywise trying to scare them some more, or the turtle trying to remind them of their promise.
I think it could absolutely be both, almost. The way it's, like you said, there's kind of a split mentality in the room. I mean, I think whatever the turtle is, we really don't have any indication other than it's been mentioned in probably 75% of the chapters. It certainly seems like it's a bit of an ever-present being, similar to Pennywise, just the counter, the flip side of that coin.
Melissa, for all we know.
What'd you say?
For all we know, it's the flip side.
Right, yeah.
That's don't really, other than like, there's a turtle. We don't get much else.
They've alluded to not even the turtle can help us here, as if it was helping against Pennywise in the past, at least. That's been a pretty common theme. I don't know if it's necessarily good, but we know it's potentially against it, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's what we're supposed to believe.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's interesting that Bill makes the comment that the last time that they had their wrists bleeding and they joined in the circle was also the last time they were a group of 7.
Mm-hmm.
After that day, whatever that day is in the future of the past that we haven't seen.
Future past.
There you go. Whatever day that is, after that, they never got together as a group of 7. They might have played in smaller chunks, but it was never all 7 together. after that day. And now here they are forming this circle again with, the bleeding hands and the joining. And Bill thinks, now this is the last time we'll ever be a group of 6. What are your thoughts or feelings on that? Do you agree that that's probably true? I don't know.
Unfortunately, I think that's probably true. It seems like whenever we have these, that whole line is italicized. It's like a mental, thought that he has, and it seems like those are potentially influenced by, like, there's always like a certain level of confidence whenever those things are said, and it's almost like maybe that's the voice of the turtle is kind of what I've come to believe inside his head, and I think it's probably true, unfortunately, which means either some might die very, very soon, or maybe, as we talked about in the walking tours, someone just finds a pretty girl in town and just doesn't come back. It's like, I'm gonna go hang out over here for a while.
Beverly's gonna find the pretty girl in town.
Yeah, she's earned it at this point. Good for her.
So I feel like there's like one other big thing that happens in this chapter, and it kind of annoys me, but I know you guys have thoughts on it, is the love triangle-ish with Bill and Beverly, and then the Ben onlooking piece, and that whole dynamic.
Real quick, I'll be quick because I know Benji's got a lot more to say on it than I do. I think it's dumb. Just in stories in general, you don't need a fucking love triangle to make it interesting. I don't fucking care. Give me the goods. Give me the stabbing. Give me the gore, guts, and interesting plot lines. I don't need this stupid fabricated shit. It always bothers me. It's always unnecessary to me. I don't have time for it. I think it's definitely problematic that Bill is falling in love with Bev, and he even specifically thinks of Audra, and is like, but she's so far away. Like, it's fine, right?
See, like, it's the it's fine piece that he's like, that she's far away, and this is my life, and like the idea that he's almost entitled to get to have this with Beverly because of the I don't even know the word I'm thinking.
Past implications or past...
No. Because of
the destiny
astronomical piece? Yes, this destiny piece, and the fact that their situation is so outside of the realm of normal, therefore it makes it like okay.
The extreme conditions make it okay.
Yeah. Like, I think I've been married for too long for that to ever be okay. Like, never ever would I think, oh yeah, well, because he's not here or because I'm not there. Like, no, like that's, and I realize part of it is that, like, that's just my world and my experience, but it's never okay.
Agreed.
Break up first, get divorced first, then go do whatever you want. Until that time, like, it's just not okay.
Agreed.
But my husband's listening. That's not okay. Not that he would ever would. It would never be. Like, it's just not even, that's the thing. Like, it's not even ever a consideration. It's like, it's just not what you do. I don't know. Maybe it's the thing.
So small detail with this whole thing that I just thought of. Give credit. I give credit to King. He got the time zones right because Audra's in the UK. It is now 1:30 in Maine, which would mean it's 6:30 in Maine because they're a 5-hour time difference. So she would be getting up.
1:30 in Maine and 6:30 in Maine?
What? No, it's 1:30 in Maine and 6:30. Sorry, in UK.
There you go.
Sorry, in the UK. I was saying because the time difference between Maine and UK, but it got the 5-hour correct. So she would be waking up to read the paper. Small little thing I caught on this one. I was like, okay, good job. It's easy to do, but still, it's always nice when people actually get stuff right. But yeah, to the whole Ben and Bev and Bill thing, Ben has this line of, he looked briefly at Beverly, who was standing close to Bill, and felt a pain he had almost forgotten. A new memory trembled almost within his grasp, then floated away. It's, again, the callbacks, the remembrances of what's happened, in the past. And he, even at this point, was like, he's moved on. He's been cool for years. And now all of a sudden, oh yeah, that was a thing. Oh yeah. It just kind of, but then he kind of just let it float away, which in this aspect, fine, cool. But then later on, Bill has a thought to Ben of, it's all about the love, the love that we have. It's not about who gets what. And it's like, yeah, that's great for the victor to think, but but in Ben's case, it's like, fuck you, I still wanted her, but she didn't want me. What is it? It's always the desire, never the time. Maybe that's all we get to take with us. And when we go out of the blue into the black, cold comfort, but maybe, but better than no comfort at all. No, actually, no comfort at all from the victor is better. I don't need
The
you.
married victor.
What's that?
The married victor.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I do agree with you, Luke. I'm not a fan of the love triangle thing, but since it's a thing, I figured we, should cover it a little bit. So that's all I got on that. And then the only other part I had for this section was that they remembered it all heading into the tunnels and something about Eddie. That was before they all left and Bill and Bev decided to do whatever.
Yeah, so the kind of final part of this, which leads into part 2, is Bev reflecting on her father, right? And she basically gets into this conversation with Bill of, my father knew, Beverly said suddenly. I came home one day from the Barrens and he just knew. Did I ever tell you what he used to say to me when he was mad? What? I worry about you, Bevy. That's what he used to say. I worry a lot. She laughed and shivered at the same time. I think he meant to hurt me, Bill. I mean, he'd hurt me before, but that last time was different. He was, well, in many ways, he was a strange man. I loved him. I loved him very much, but... And then she kind of hesitates, and then she says, I hated him too. I loved him. I hated him, but I loved him too. So this is certainly something that she struggled with. And he kind of encourages her to, okay, well, if that's the case, say it again. And she talks about how I always thought I'd be struck dead, by God or whatever if I talked badly against my parents. And guess what? She's not, because he's awful. But I thought it was an interesting dynamic between those two that she's finally said this, and I think that's going to be a pretty big power point for her. Not like a presentation or anything, but, a big point of power for her.
More of a Google slide.
Maybe a Google slide. Maybe a... what's the other one? I can't remember it. Anyway. But I think it's definitely going to be important, and the way it kind of leads into the next section, I think we can kind of touch on it.
Something just stood out to me when you were rereading that I didn't catch when I read it on my own.
Okay.
In where she's talking about the fact that her dad had hurt her, she says the line, but that last time was different.
Mm-hmm.
That's really interesting to me because...
Oh yeah, that colored the whole way I read section 2.
I've always missed that. So now, and I guess we can take that as a jumping into section 2. Why is this the last time?
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be the last time. It should. But what changes in her world then that he doesn't ever hurt her again? That's all. Continue.
Yeah. So, to really quickly break the fourth wall for all of our wonderful listeners out there, this is actually the second time we've recorded this episode. You could hear my version of this chapter at some point, maybe soon, but Melissa and Ben did not get recorded, so it's a one-sided conversation.
Through no fault of Melissa and Ben.
Well, no, obviously it's your fault, but it's just really funny because this feels a little more like, hey, that was the dress rehearsal, and now we're redoing this conversation, and I feel like we're getting almost different things out of it too because we've talked about it a bit. So
that whole with the last time thing, I just caught that just now.
That's awesome. See, maybe we should do it twice every time. No, we should not do it twice every time.
No.
That was a bad joke.
I don't know. It wasn't a joke. That was just bad.
Okay, so we are going to roll into section 2, which is a flashback to 1958. I believe this is in August 14th or so.
I believe so, yes.
Mentioned.
I think so.
So, Bev gets home from playing at the Barrens, and Benj, I'm going to kick it off with you of what happens when she walks in the door.
Yeah, so I'm going to preface this because for me, this is probably one of the toughest sections to read yet in this entire book, because she walks in the door and it ties in from the last line, or of the last section. Bev says, he was home. He, part 2, Lower Main Street, 11:30 a.m. Threw her across the room before she had even gotten all the way through the door. That's how you start the section. Just all of a sudden, she walks in the door and bam. And we find out that he had been made aware of her doings lately and followed her down into the Barrens and found her playing with the boys and smoking, which is a go-to callback for him.
Mm-hmm.
But
Real quick on that, I love the way that she realizes how he knew, like, because he doesn't say it right away. He's like, "Oh, I saw." She sees the mud on the ground, and that
yes,
matches the
black
mud in the
viscous.
barrens. I just thought that was really neat of her perception to notice that.
Exactly, because she, at the very first instance, she's like, "What the hell? What's going on? What, Daddy? What? I'm sorry." And she looks down, and sees the or the mud dripping, and she quickly catches on, and she's like, "Okay, how do I track this? I'm not doing anything wrong, but and she doesn't even realize what he's being upset about, apart from the smoking thing. She's kind of just moving right past that one. She's not even addressing that. I did have this thought of Bev, so young and naive to not understand what her father was talking about being intact, having a vision of herself pulling her pants off and only having one leg. That one in this harsh chapters, always in this very harsh section, always gets a slight chuckle, because I can totally imagine a kid not understanding what an adult is saying in that aspect, and just like, you squished yourself, or and you're missing a leg, kind of the original Harry Potter style when he first thought of squinching and stuff.
Splinching.
Squinching, yeah.
Splinching.
Sorry.
I was like squinching. I don't
It's too early. It's too early right now. But so I like that kind of like, and it's not lighthearted. It's her in terror mode, but it's just that one little aspect. It's kind of a weird dynamic to have that thought process.
Melissa, what do you think of the opening of this section here?
Well, I have two kind of big thoughts. I have just like the thought about Beverly and then the thought about her dad. My big idea about Beverly is that she's got this line where she's like, she's thinking to herself, "Oh, stop it, Beverly. He's your father, and fathers don't kill daughters." Yes, they do. Sorry, girl. Like, they do. He really could kill you. So I think it's really hard for kids in general, like, to take their parents off a pedestal when their parents are making giant mistakes, right? The idea that your parent's supposed to take care of you and your parent's supposed to be the protector of you, and yet that's the person hurting you. It's very difficult for kids to accept that.
I think that's a big part of what she struggles with in this chapter for sure, right? And she continually goes back to thinking of the quote unquote good times, and it's kind of like when you get in podcasting or like any business, you have one negative review and it takes like 10 good reviews to outweigh that one negative one, because those are the ones that stick with you. This is almost the reverse of that. One good time with her father outweighs, the last 50 bad times, because it's like that prisoner's guilt almost. She's stuck there, right? And
it's not like, I mean, I agree with you. It's sort of like that, but I'm just thinking of, just because of the work that I do, right, and the profession that I'm in, I see kids in similar situations, and they will defend their parents, and they will back up their parents, and they will be mad if they are removed from their, like, they are happiest when they're with their parent, no matter what their parent is doing to them, because you can't separate the idea of themselves as what they need as a person from that adult. And it makes me sad for her, because we even see ramifications of that in her adult life by her connection to Tom. And there's so much trauma with this girl. And I'm so proud of her for what she does in this chapter to get away from it. But there's so much going on, and King does such a great job of showing that without it being like in your face. He experiences it with her, as opposed to like telling us, "Oh yeah, she's had a traumatic childhood." So that was one. Any thoughts about Beverly that I need to do before I jump to Al?
Oh, yeah, her complex of the good times. It's just she harkens back to when she was 4 and they were he was washing her in the tub, which is completely harmless, like just having a good time, and like it's a real sweet scene between those two. And then later on it gets into, which I'll go ahead and mention that line now. She looked back, and here he came, Al Marsh, janitor and custodian, a gray man dressed in khaki pants and a khaki shirt with 2 flat pockets, a keyring attached to his belt by a chain, his hair flying, but he wasn't in his eyes. The essential he who had washed her back and punched her in the gut and had done both because he worried about her. He worried a lot. The he who had once tried to braid her hair when she was 7 made a botch of it and then got giggling with her about the way it stuck out everywhere. The he who knew how to make cinnamon eggnogs on Sunday that tasted better than anything you could buy for a quarter at the dairy ice cream bar. The father he, mailman of her life, delivering a mixed post from that other sexual state. None of that was in his eyes now. She saw blank murder there. She saw it there. She ran from it. So I know I jumped ahead a little bit in the narrative of when she starts being chased by him, but I think it just very much goes into what you were saying of it's hard to get over that you see that person that is your person, right? That's your parent. Or, I think it applies to domestic abuse relationships too.
Mm-hmm.
That's my person, and it's hard to take that out of it. And luckily she does run here. While she's being kind of thrown around the room, she realizes that it is in the room with them at least. And she says, it is everywhere in Derry. It just fills the hollow places. That's all. And she needs to go tell Bill about that. So I think that's, again, not surprising to us. Good on her for realizing that this isn't really her dad. Even though her dad's complete garbage, I think there is something more going on here than just him.
I am going to jump because that's a perfect segue to my next thought.
I teed it up for you.
Good job. Look at us. We're so good at this. The second time around. So the idea that there's something more going on with Al than just Al, like I truly believe that Beverly is right, that it's it, right? It is controlling her dad. But the idea that it also just took what was already there. We have been given little pieces all summer long, right? That her dad, this sexualizing of his daughter has been impacting their relationship.
Very progressively, yeah.
Of that. And so it didn't have to plant that. It simply took those ideas and used what Al was already thinking. Mm-hmm. And I think that's almost scarier.
Yeah, the way I had very, very much the similar note, Melissa, but he basically turned Al up to 11. Like, he took everything and just said, it doesn't go to 10, it goes to 11.
Why don't you just make 10 louder? But it goes to 11.
But, and that's, exactly it. It's thoughts that, yeah, you might have these lingering thoughts about your child, about everything. Everybody does, in the sense of worry, and because I worry about you, Bev. Now, Al takes it to the nth creepiest degree, even without Pennywise. But, every person worries about their child and wants to make sure they're doing right and everything. But, yeah, with Pennywise's influences, his just got turned all the way up, and this is the explosion of it. And it kind of ties into the, like Melissa said, the connection with Tom, or that was Luke, I'm sorry, but about the smoking thing, because Al is so incensed right now, has so much rage that it's not even him, but he keeps coming back to, and you were smoking, kind of thing. And that was the trigger for Tom back in the day. So that might be another sign of the connection between those two, which we've seen many of them. But it makes not sense, but it's understandable how Bev could be drawn into that because of that parental father figure kind of thing that she was aware of. But Al does have the line of, a girl who would chew gum will smoke, a girl who will smoke will drink, and a girl who will drink, well, everyone knows what a girl that will do. And it's just because that's all his mentality can go with. I think that's more of a slip of the normal Al Marsh, even the happy-go-lucky Al Marsh. That's not the Pennywise kind of influence with that line. That's one thing that's always been in his head of just, my daughter's a whore, and it's that, and I would love Beverly. I'm a waitress. I'm not a whore. Call back
my
to
mom's a waitress.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I like when her rage comes out in defiance, right? It's the same as what we saw with Tom Rogan. It comes out here again too, and she starts screaming back at him. You can't do it anymore. It's making you do it, but you let it in. It's like, I know that you have your own problems. I can deal with those myself, but this one this is too much, and guess what? You're just as much to blame for allowing it to seep into you. You know, it basically when you're blinded by rage, that's the only time that we've seen that it can really take over another person, can come in and skin change into them, you know, whatever that influence is, right? And I like that she calls him out on that. Like, I blame you for letting it in, not necessarily for exactly what's going on right now, because that's not terribly different than the norm. So, but I think the things that she blames him for is just allowing that to be a thing at all. So, any final thoughts before she runs out the door? Right? She books for it, and this chase scene, I thought it was pretty exciting. Like, I thought it was pretty well written and a lot of really interesting things going on and or not going on. Benj, you want to take it away on that by unmuting yourself first?
Sorry, was checking a note here, a new note that I remembered, and so I want to get into this one as well. But yeah, so as she's running past a bunch of people, and they're actually reacting to the chase. They're not intervening, which they don't do, but which we saw in the last interlude. But they at least take notice. I think it's Mr. Pascal looked up from his porch where he was listening to the Red Sox games. The Zimmerman kids who were working on their Hudson Hornet had
Disney Cars alert, Hudson Hornet, 1950s. That's all. Continue.
Right, which they had bought for $25. Mrs. Denton looked out at her second floor apartment, one of her 6 daughters dresses in her lap, more mending. And then you have little Lars Therminius pulled in his red ball flyer wagon quickly off the cracked sidewalk and stood on Bucky Pascal's dying lawn. He burst into tears as Bevy, who had spent a patient morning teaching him how to tie his sneakers. A moment later, her father passed, hollering at her, and Lars, who was then 3 and would die 12 years later in a motorcycle accident, saw something terrible and inhuman in Mr. Marsh's face. He had nightmares for 3 weeks after. In them, he saw Mr. Marsh turning into a spider with inside his clothes. And it's because the other 3 that we hear about, the Pascal, the Zimmermans, and Denton, they're all adults. They just see Mr. Marsh, Al, as just, he's just chasing his daughter because he's going to do whatever. That's fine. But Lars sees him as Pennywise. The kid sees Pennywise in Al's face. And it's that whole paragraph definitely sticks out to me of that's Derry, and that's exactly what it is. And it kind of goes into the next paragraph here. And this was the note I was going to make, unless Luke, you had.
Yeah, no, you know that I have that whole paragraph highlighted as well, because that just that paragraph really stands out to me, the Lars Therminius, because like it took 2 lines by King. I just want to give King more credit, which we do often because it's so well deserved. His writing is so good. It took 2 lines for him to make us care about little Lars Therminius at all. I mean, it's just like the other names. It's like, okay, fine, like, a couple kids in town that have a car, 16-year-olds, whatever, their car that they got pretty cheap and they take care of it. Like, that's cool. But like, King just drops this line that Bev had spent some time with this kid, teaching him to tie his shoes. And like already you have that little bit of a connection that just makes the nightmares that he has after seeing Al Marsh, that much more impactful, I think. Like it was really succinct, really clear, and I think just really, really well done. On a character I guarantee we're never going to see again.
No.
We've heard the last name Therminius before, at some point in, I think it was the Bradley gang shootout. I think there was a Therminius involved in that.
I think you're right, yeah.
Really?
I think so.
Yeah, it was one of the town folk. But in the next paragraph of this, she basically goes on. As she's running, she thinks if he caught her, he would choke her, or beat her, or kick her. And when it was over, someone would come and collect him, and he would sit in a cell with the way Eddie Corcoran's stepfather was sitting in a cell, dazed and uncomprehending. So she's already realizing, this is all internal thought on her part. That's exactly what's going on. She knows, like, in this moment, I don't think there's ever... Well, I guess they knew of Eddie Corcoran's father or stepfather and everything, but she just knew that this is just the way it is, and it's going to be, and he's going to not even know what he did or realize what he did, but it's just what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and it's unfortunate that no one really steps in to help, but this, I think, as we talked about on the first time we recorded this is a different era, that this is taking place in the late 50s is much different than it is in the 2010s, well, guess what? Any bystander who sees this going on is going to side with the parent in this because, I mean, yeah, parents know what's best for their children, don't question him. More than anything, help get her back to him because she's a runaway child that's, probably delinquent, in some way. And it's just amazing how different things are now, that if you see a kid running away from an adult, you don't just automatically side with the adult.
No,
blindly.
most of the time you side with the kid.
Right, because they can't protect themselves. And
Yep.
That's, I'm going to say, a positive turn that society has taken, at least around here, that I haven't witnessed personally, but I assume that that's the case. So as she's running, she runs past all the meat packing places, which we've heard these names on and off all the time. And it says, she ducked down an alley that ran behind Warehouse Row. This was the rear of the buildings which fronted up Mile Hill, Star Beef, Armor Meat Packing, Hemp Hill Storage and Warehousing, Eagle Beef and Kosher Meats. The alley was narrow and cobbled, made narrower still by the bunches of fuming garbage cans and bins set out there. The cobbles were slimy with God knows what, offal and ordure. There was a mixture of smells, some bland, some sharp, some simply titanic, but all spoke of meat and slaughter. So, as Pennywise is in the scene, we always get these smells related to rotting or death, decay, meat, slaughter. We always get, so basically I'm checking off my smells check mark here. And so as she's running past these meat packing places, she stops, and two men lounged in the loading doorway of Kirshner Packing Works, which quickly, Kirshner reminded me of Mrs. Kirsch, or even Kitchener Iron Works. So just similar name things that get dropped that seem to be related. But munching thick sandwiches, open dinner buckets near at hand. You in a woeful place, girl, one of them said mildly. Looks like you're going to the woodshed with your pa. The other laughed. So this is like a time where adults are clearly aware of what's going on and just make a joke out of it. Like, it just plays right into that. Yeah, guess what? You're probably in trouble. You probably are deserving this, you jackass girl. Like, that's what they're saying. Like, don't do bad things. Any other thoughts on our two little meat packer buddies?
I just hate people.
That's good to do. I'm with
I mean,
you.
that's like, are you kidding me? But again, time frame and time. Okay, so I'm letting it go.
So Al keeps chasing her. She gets to the theological seminary, kind of evades him just enough, kind of pulls the old Texas switch, like turns down an alleyway, and he doesn't see where she goes necessarily and runs past. So she gets over there and is slightly safe, but he's still in the area enough that she knows where he's at and can feel him in the area and is hoping that she doesn't get seen by him. So Benj, I'm going to go to you at this point.
Yeah, so at this moment, has a little bit of respite, and she starts to worry about the others. Are they having similar experiences to things happening at the same times because they had hurt it, And so she feels that they could be in danger, and she needs to get back to warn them. We have seen instances or pseudo instances of where it can be in multiple places at once or in relatively short time frames of attack one. We saw that in the walking tours. We haven't seen it yet as a kid, but it's neat or interesting to see that Bev is already considering that she might not be the only target. I'm not sure if she was the only target at this point. I'm not going to give away spoilers. However, I do think she was targeted first because she was the easiest target, and she's the one that hurt it the most in the house on Nebold Street.
What do you mean by she's the easiest target?
Easiest target as in having Al to do the dirty work.
So Al was the easiest entry point.
Yes.
Not that she was easy, but
no, she was the easiest to get a hold of. Yeah.
Because as soon as you said that, I was like, well, is that because Al is the easiest to infiltrate, or because she's an easy
ease of proximity to an already loaded gun, basically. Yes. That is Al Marsh.
Yes, that's where I was going from.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I wasn't saying she was the because and also to the next point of she was also the one that hurt it the most, and so he wants
top of the list.
yeah, so it's the high value target kind of thing with ease.
That
So
Pennywise says every night before he goes to sleep.
Here's my list of high value targets.
Beverly March, Bill Denbrough, Eddie Kasprek, Ben, yeah,
It's Ario Pennywise.
Harry Pennywise.
Oh, that's a whole nother theory we're not going to get into. Sorry, I opened that.
Pennywise is the drowned god. That's all I can say.
What is dead may never die.
Exactly. She rises harder and stronger than before. Yeah.
That doesn't bode well for our heroes.
It's been true.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk any more about Beverly, or can we talk about the other character who shows up in this particular section?
Yeah, let's
roll into it, Melissa.
So we get one more person with some Pennywise interaction via the talking moon. There's a flashback for you, something we've seen before. Henry appears, and my really only comment about Henry is that he's gone round the bend.
Yeah.
We've seen him going down, but now he's officially gone round the bend, and he is off his rocker.
Yeah, King has it actually worded very well, and I have this whole thing highlighted. Through that summer, Henry had been steadily out over some mental abyss, walking on a bridge that had grown relentlessly more and more narrow. On the day when he had allowed Patrick Coxter to caress him, that bridge had narrowed to a tightrope. That tightrope had snapped this morning. He had gone out to the yard naked except for his ragged yellowing undershorts. He looked up the sky. The ghost of the last night's moon still lingered there, and as he looked at it, the moon had suddenly changed to a skeletal, grinning face. Yeah, he fucked in the head.
As far as we know, this is the first time that Pennywise has shown up to the Bowers, right? As far as we know, this is kind of the thing that puts him over the edge, is Pennywise showing up in the moon for I'm assuming the first time.
I think so. Like first time in chronological time order, not first time in a chapter.
Yeah. We definitely have seen it before in the past future, but in true timeline, I believe this is the earliest instance that he's had influence directly like this. Not an Unwin, Dubé, and Webby kind of influence when they were attacking Ben. I think we thought that there may have been some interaction there, but this is like a direct influence that Henry's aware of, I guess. Similar to that, we see Victor and Belch being completely entranced and just kind of following along with it. And it really, really, again, I always foil these three with the three in the Adrian Mellon chapter 2. They're very much playing the Unwin and Dubé roles in this one. And it just stinks because we've heard mention over time and time again that they don't want to do things to this level that they're being forced into. They're reluctant to be even involved with Henry at this point. They were trying to get out of the rock fight. I mean, until that they were kind of emotionally brought into it and couldn't back out. But there's always that reluctance, and it just sucks that they're being pulled into this because they are the Crab and Goyle lackeys, unfortunately.
Except they talk.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. Any final thoughts on section 2? I found a highlighted thing that I wanted to mention that I was looking for a while, but It's actually in the conversation between Al and Bev, and it's when he's calling her a slut child. And there's this in-between section that says, now she felt guilt mixed with her terror. Was her father so wrong? Hadn't she had, in parentheses, you've been a slut child to them? Bad thoughts of whatever it was that he was talking about. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing as the way you've been a slut child. He's looking at me now. Not the same. So I wanted to point that out, as whenever, Ben, you were talking about Al saying her not understanding what being intact meant. I think she was more just surprised that conversation happened. I don't think that was new awareness to her. It was more, why is this a thing? Like, this is a weird conversation. And she's so thrown off by that because she has had these types of thoughts, probably about Bill. And we know that whenever she saw him with his shirt off at the end of the Bullseye chapter, that she had feelings. She had probably, prepubescent sexual feelings. And
Which are totally normal and
Yeah.
developmentally appropriate. Sorry.
Absolutely. And thank you for saying that, because that's what she also realizes. That's different. It's not the same thing as the way that Almarsh is looking at me now. Like, she sees that that's fucked up.
Yes.
And I wanted to point that out, that and not to say like, oh, Benji, you're wrong. I just want to point that out, as that's a neat thing that King puts in the middle of this chapter to show that she understands the full weight of what the hell's going on with Al Marsh right now, more than he'll ever realize. And I just thought that was something to point out.
No, and I absolutely agree with you. It's you're absolutely right. I was more pointing out to where she's still in that varying age between young adult and child, to where you hear you're not intact, and your brain goes to the kid part, not to the sexualized adult part, and it's one of those, she's on the in between, and then that later line,
and then her leg comes off in the vision.
Exactly. And then that later line, she realizes, once these calls her a slut child, and she's like, oh, that's what you're talking about. No, that, yeah. And the clicks of that's where he's taking it. Her brain just at that moment didn't connect the two.
It doesn't make the assumption of the sexualization at first, like adults
exactly.
will. So,
exactly.
Good point. Section 3. So this is right after Henry is introduced in the past, and now we jump forward to the library again, right? And we've got this kind of quick conversation, because we're in Mike Hanlon's perspective here, and he has these thoughts of faith and power, and I wanted to touch on those real quick, because he's always second guessing himself, right? He's like, maybe I should have told them, like such and such. Because he carries so much of the torch of what information they have, that he has to be very careful. And so he always has these regrets, but he gets into this quick little comment of faith and power he had come to believe were interchangeable. Was the final truth even simpler? That no act of faith was possible until you were rudely pushed out into the screaming middle of things, like a newborn child skydiving shootlessly out of his mother's womb? Once you were falling, you were forced to believe in the chute into existence, weren't you? Pulling the ring as you fell became your final statement on the subject, one way or the other. So it's kind of like faith and power are a shit or get off the pot. You have to believe in it, or you're not, and you'll find out if you were right or wrong. Like, you can ignore it, and you'll find out if you're right or wrong one way or the other. And it very much reminds me of that belief in magic is what allows magic to become real. And the only way you can utilize that magic is if you actually believe in it. So faith and power, it's been a pretty common theme through this story, and I like when we get Mike's perspectives, because he just talks like directly to us of like, hey, you're seeing these things, this is how I see it, because he's one of us. Like, he's watching these things unfold too. So I find Mike to always be a really refreshing perspective to be in. So he also realizes that he has been kind of neglecting some of his duties, and he needs to write down some of his own histories.
The record keeper in us.
Yeah. And so this section almost felt like another interlude. Like, I kind of got a little bit of the feeling where, we're getting his internal, because that's really all we've ever gotten from Mike, except for maybe one or two flashback chapters. But for the most part, it was feeling more like an interlude, that as we've gotten used to him jotting everything down, taking the notes and everything. But he does know, or he knows that they don't know everything. They said, I remember everything. I remember the tunnels. I remember Eddie. And in Mike's head, he's like, yeah, but you're still not remembering a couple of key parts.
You think you know, but you have no idea.
Yeah, exactly. And it makes you wonder, what are they not remembering now, so far yet? They remember, fight, everything they said, and nope, not quite. So it leaves that little cliffhanger of what's yet to come, or to have had happened.
Yeah, absolutely. In the near past future. And so he does take his notes, and he realizes he hasn't written anything down since he made the phone calls, right? And he's like, I gotta basically get all of this updated. I guess it's only been 3 days. I mean, so it hasn't been all that long. But I think it's very interesting where he keeps his notebook. Did you guys notice it all?
Not until you said it the first time we recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he keeps his notebook of all of the interviews that he's had, and all of this information finding and record keeping, like you said, Melissa. on one of the library shelves, in between the Frick and Michaud dairy histories that are still in the library. And I know the last time we heard about the Frick and the Michaud histories of dairy is when we were talking to Albert Carson back in the first interlude chapter. And it was funny because he's the same guy that says if you want to go searching around Mansion Dairy, there are many keys. You might not find all of them. If you keep digging, you're going to keep finding more and more secrets. You might not have the key, but you can start unlocking doors. And he references the Frick and Michaud, and they're the ones. The reason it stands out to me is because they're the ones that Carson was like, no, oh God, no, don't read them. Throw them in the garbage can, and then go on to these other histories that are much better. Which, in Mike's perspective, he says that he did throw them away. He did exactly that. He threw them away, and maybe it was a figure of speech. Like I would assume it was, but it just stood out to me as, guess what? They are still in the library, which makes me think maybe you can't throw them away because they're like how am I going to try to say this? Like the official dairy histories, like the on the books history, the non-Pennywise influenced histories, the cover-up stories.
Oh, what is it? It's the
like the press
highly
release.
biased and selective history. What does Hermione say in book 4 about the Hogwarts history?
Yeah.
It's that. It's the highly selective and biased, that discludes some of the darker parts of Hogwarts history.
Yep.
Well, I just had this thought, Luke, with the frickin' Michaud. Is it possible that they actually did have the information in there? And you said Carson was the one, Albert Carson is the one Mike was talking to. Is it possible that he was saying, it's got all this random, useless, these books have these useless things that happen. That's not true dairy history. And basically Carson was trying to say, trying to add to the cover up by not reading them. Though once Mike read them, he realized, wait, this has the information that we need. Or
so looking back at that first interlude chapter, he's already talking to Carson about dairy stuff, and because he's one of the old timers, he's one of the ones that knows what's really going on, and they kind of show that, and at least that's how I take it. I'm not saying it's impossible. But maybe go back and look at it and see if you can find anything in that section. Not right now or anything, but it could be. I guess
thought that I had, just why would Mike, Mike say, "Oh yeah, I threw it away," but then he hides his notebook between those two. This is the true, like just where my brain's at the moment,
Yeah, no, I see where you're going with that for sure. So he, being Mike here, starts having a feeling of being watched, right? He starts feeling like there's another presence in the library. Melissa,
And Henry finally makes it to the party. He's a little late. He had some traffic. There was some relocation issues, but
catch a ride.
Better late than never.
Yep. And the way he's described is really interesting. Ben, do you want to take that?
Yeah, it was the face of a man being pushed into a premature age, a man who was 39 going on 73, but was also the face of a 12-year-old boy. And it got younger the closer he approached, as if he was reverting back in time. The further he got away from the children's library, the younger he looked.
Right. Which is really interesting, as we've seen like our heroes, the older they've gotten, the closer they get to Derry, they've started de-aging and harkening back to their old selves much, much more. So I feel like that's certainly a similar type thing that's going on with Bowers right now.
One little line I would like, thinking back on that in the luncheon or whatever, even at night, just Ben making a comment, damn, my pants getting a little tight.
Yeah.
But as I kind of talked about before, we knew about the escape before anybody else, technically, because it was mentioned on the radio during Bill's cab ride. And it's interesting that Mike had been so consumed over the last 2 days to not keep his ritual of reading the paper, listening to the radio as he, cleaned up. Because had he known, he would have heard an escaped person from,
Juniper Hill.
Juniper, thank you. An escaped, inmate from Juniper. He would have already knew that was Henry, and Henry's coming, so he would have been prepared. but because something else was drawing his attention, it left them all vulnerable. Unfortunately, him first.
Yeah, I think that's a good pickup. The fact that he should have known, right? He's the news guy. He should have known. But like there's stuff going on. I got friends in town. I'm busy, so that's all right. Do you notice though? Like I feel like there was a very I just got as we continued on. Now that Henry's here, that there's a very superhero thing going on at the end of this. Like we get a cool fight scene, but if Henry is like the supervillain, Mike gets him monologuing.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Like,
you almost got me monologuing.
yeah, right. Like it's very, what's his name? Syndrome.
Yeah.
Incredibles. Like, oh, look, you got me monologuing. Like it's such a fan servicey thing, but that's what Mike does. Let's try and talk him off the ledge. Let's try and see if we can resolve this without violence.
Yeah, and
But it's so futile.
It is, and as we talked about in our first recording, but it makes sense because in any instance, because I've had dealings with mentally ill and everything like that of dealing with them in the public, and a lot of times they have sound mind. You just have to kind of get them to click back into reality. And if you say, "Hey, let's get you back to Juniper Hill. We'll call the police. You're going to be fine. You're not going to get hurt. They'll keep you safe." And for 99% of other people in that situation, it could work, but there's another force driving Henry that would not allow that to work. So using that tact is a good attempt. It's just unfortunate there was nothing going to stop it.
Except that doesn't work if like the person trying to use it is the target. So like I do this with my students a lot, I'm not saying my students are mentally ill. I don't mean that. At all. Sorry. But like if a kid comes to me or if I'm around a kid and they're like all worked up and mad about something, the first thing I say to them is, "You're not mad at me, remember? Like you don't, all this anger and all this, it's not directed at me. So like you don't have to yell and be angry and give me let's just talk, because remember, I'm not the person you're mad at." And like just that reminder is so helpful for those kids. But in this case, Mike is the person that Henry is attacking. He is the person he's mad at. He is the victim or the intended target. So Mike talking is not going to do any good, because like even mental illness or not, that's the person I'm going for. Therefore, like that's just what it is. Now, if there had been some outside person there trying to talk Henry down, that might have worked, but not the target.
True, but at the same time, it actually could, because if you can, even as a target, as a victim, if you can humanize yourself to somebody, you just need that one instance of clicking back into place, clicking back into reality kind of thing. It can work to your advantage.
Oh, it can. I'm not saying don't try it if you're in this sort of situation. I'm saying it's not going to work for Mike.
Yeah, no, and I do agree with you.
Also, real quick, PSA, as it is Mental Awareness Month, right? Definitely check out the National Alliance on Mental Illness, NAMI.org. Each year, millions of Americans face the reality of living with mental illness. During May, this month right now, NAMI and the rest of the country are raising awareness of mental health. Each year, we fight stigma, provide support, educate the public, and advocate for policies that support people with mental illnesses and their families. So, we are certainly no experts on mental illness at all. We mean no offense to anybody. If anything we said has been taken in general terms, this is very literary based. I just want to put that out there. Be an advocate. Be a helper.
Exactly. So,
I thought it was interesting that Henry calls Pennywise it specifically. He has the line that, if I can find it real quick, unless someone else has it real quick. I was behind the times in my book. Oh, that's the wrong section. Don't look. That's section 4. I don't know.
See, as we're scrolling, the things that are jumping out to me because I'm trying to read this on computer screen is all the racial slurs. They're just the amount that King puts into Henry's head. And that and I'm not saying it's from King. It's, it's Henry has this put in his head, and that's all he can revert back to. Kind of like the Al Marsh smoking thing. Mm-hmm. That's the one thing he can revert back to of his human or of his common sense or common self awareness thing. Henry jumps to the racial slurs over and over and over again.
So, yeah, absolutely, which is disgusting. And so the time that he calls it is before Mike says that term for the monster, and it says, From the moon, Henry said. He put a hand in his pocket. Came from the moon. Lots of voices. He paused, frowned slightly, then shook his head. Lots, but really only one. Its voice. Did you see it, Henry? Yep, Henry said. Frankenstein tore off Victor's head. You should have heard it. Made a sound like a great big zipper going down. Then it went after Belch. Belch fought it. Did he? Yep, that's how I got away. You left him to die. Don't you say that! And then Henry goes on a tirade of his whole perspective of a scene that I haven't witnessed myself yet, but we've had allusions to over and over again. And we get a little more detail here that, Belch, in Henry's mind, Belch sacrifices himself to allow Henry to get away, right? And I like how Mike flips that on him. He's like, well, no, you left him to die. Like, that's your fault that he didn't make it. If you would have stuck together, kind of thing, like, which is, I'm sure, an idea Henry's never once considered. That I could have helped, or that I left him to die. Henry consistently kind of plays the victim card here a bit. He throws out, you guys never fought fair. You guys were always outnumbered us, and it's just such a delusional view of what we've seen from the kids' perspectives of what Henry was like. He has no idea. Henry himself has no idea, like, how awful he was, it seems like.
The only thing I'm going to say to contradict that, because I agree with you, Henry is awful and delusional, and the idea that that the losers didn't fight fair. I'm sorry, 5-on-1 before the rock fight, bullshit. But in terms of this, I actually kind of agree with Henry that, like, he would not have survived if it weren't for Belch, because if he had stayed with Belch would not have gotten away. It would have gotten both of them. I truly believe that.
I believe that.
Mm-hmm. I don't have to be faster than it. I just have to be faster than Belch.
That's my point. It's the zombie apocalypse theory, right? Like, I don't have to be the fastest. I just can't be the slowest. So I think in that teeny tiny instance, I kind of support Henry's, like, upset at that. Like, I had to let Belch die. Otherwise, I too would have died.
Mm-hmm.
And and not that, part of it is like, then you die for your friends kind of a thing. Then you let him kill you. But I mean, in that instance, I don't blame Henry.
Yeah.
For that teeny, tiny, itty bitty little moment.
Yeah, because also think of it, Mike is looking at it through rose-colored glasses to a point of he had this group of friends that could work together and survive. Henry and Belch and Victor aren't they're buddies, they're compadres, but they're not friends. They're not the family they chose. They're the ones that just, you're here, I'm here. Okay. Anybody can kind of join as long as you kind of fit in with us. But so it's a little bit, so yeah, it absolutely makes sense because Mike has that sense of, yeah, you're friends. You stand up for each other. And it's a different mentality because Mike had the true friends. Henry didn't.
Right. He had lackeys.
Exactly.
So they start fighting, right? And Henry pulls out his old knife, tries to use it. They scramble. Any other thoughts on the fight itself? I know Henry's on the ground. Mike has a chance to basically kill him because he grabs a letter opener, right? It says Jesus saves. So there's your God reference, which we get here and there. And it was interesting the way it was described of Henry's knife seeming to turn to cut Mike of its own accord. It seems like it very much had a Harry Potter's wand in book 7, spoilers, shooting gold sparks. We'll leave it at that, just to know the reference. But I know as we talked last time about this section, it's meant to be a little ambiguous. I mean, it likely just in the heat of the moment, in the hectic excitement of this fight, Mike just doesn't realize that, it spins, by Henry knocking it. It just seems like it does that to himself. But I just thought it was interesting the way that Mike questions that, because we know that it is nearby, and that kind of thing doesn't seem too far-fetched to me. So Mike is bleeding all over. He gets stabbed in the leg pretty hard, right? And he then ends up seemingly killing Henry by stabbing him in the gut. And and that's kind of it. Oh, we didn't even touch on the Stan head, right? There's an it
Stan
appearance.
shows up again.
Stan's head, Stan's ahead, shows up. At the same time, we know that Henry sees whatever it turns into for him, and he starts screaming in absolute horror, in utter horror, it says. So he's absolutely terrified by whatever he sees.
Mm-hmm.
So much so that it completely distracts him from the fight for a while.
Right.
What do you guys think he saw there?
Maybe his dad, maybe a zombie, White Walker. I don't know.
Yeah, I was thinking after our last conversation about this, the dad is a good option, or the Frankenstein, because Henry's still stuck in that 12-year-old mindset, and so the two scariest things that probably could do that to him would be either the thing that scared him back then, which was the Frankenstein, seeing him kill Belch, or his father.
Yep, I would think his father, just because we haven't seen that be used against him. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's where I would guess, but I guess we will probably never find out because he did. At least it seems so.
Yeah.
Melissa, I know you already talked about Mike being a superhero and scrambling over to the phone, right?
Well, I talked about him being a superhero. I think it's really cool that he goes and, like, even through the pain and the blacking out and all of that, and still is able to call for help. He calls the hospital, and on the call to the hospital, he only hears Pennywise's voice. Most people would probably freak out. Even most of the losers would probably freak out at that point and not know what to do. But, I mean, Mike has been training for this for years, right? Like, his Pennywise defense mechanism is high. So he knows to talk over the voice.
Mm-hmm.
He's not sure who's there. He's not sure if anybody, but even the idea that he has enough brain power left to know to try to keep talking and explain what happened, that's amazing. So you go, Mike.
Yeah, absolutely. And very smart, having the wherewithal to even consider that being an option. It's not like the Scary Movie where, the killer's in the house and he's on the phone and, you can't get out because he's tying up the line. It's a little different than that. So
right.
Let's get to our questions or thoughts for the new reader.
So we talked about early on, right? The circle closes and they've got the 6, and Bill is like, we're never going to be all together again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who dies? We ask you this every once in a while.
I know.
feel like this is a good time for a new prediction.
I feel like it's been a lot more lately. It's like every other chapter. These
questions are harder to come up with.
What?
I said these questions are harder to come up with, so we got to.
I don't necessarily think it's harder. I think it's applicable because we have new information.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. I'm also just saying, we're trying to come up with a decent question for you. This is an easy go-to.
Who dies? I think Bill and Bev are probably fine. I think Ben's probably fine, even though I called for Ben to be dead at one point. The fact that they keep bringing up this love triangle horse shit and how it's going to play a part, or it played a part before to taking him out in some way. Same thing with he thrusts his fist against the post thing. He's going to say that at one point. Bill will. But I think those 3 characters are safe for now, at least. I don't know if they're walking out of it, the final confrontation, entirely, but at least this night, I think they're okay. Oh, I'm going to say Mike is not going to make it. I don't think he's going to survive the leg wound. He even says that, he got I think he got my femoral artery, which you're going to bleed. That's one of the big ones. That's a pretty big one. He did get the tourniquet on, good on him, but I don't know. I don't feel good for him. And okay. I think we need to lose a character, especially one as loved as him, would make it feel heavier, so.
What about Richie and Eddie? Are they safe?
I could see Richie being killed in some way, because he's similar to Stan. He kind of hesitated to believe in the monster originally more than anybody else. Mm-hmm. When that wasn't anything, that was just a dream. When he thought back to the Paul Bunyan statue, he had a harder time accepting that was a real instance. So I think there could be a harkening back to that he hesitates just enough to be killed.
Because he who hesitates is lost.
Always.
Okay.
All
right.
That's it. That's all I'm saying.
All right. So did Mike's call get through to the hospital?
So I think so. I think it was smart of him to keep talking because, yes, I think the phone call did go through, and this was just a mental trick by Pennywise to make him think that it hadn't so that he would just quit and die easier. I still think Mike's going to bleed out on the floor and be found by the, ambulance, the emergency rescuers coming in, and I don't think he's going to make it, though.
Poor Mike.
I know.
R.I.P. Mike.
Questions or thoughts from the new reader? I don't really have anything. I don't know. Middle of a chapter. There's so much going on, but it's so much in the middle. I don't know. I'm excited to see where it's going. It's very action packed, and it's a good fucking book. So that's it.
Yay.
My favorite thing, Melissa. What was your favorite thing?
Superhero Mike calling the hospital.
His name is Mike, and he's a superhero. He uses a phone, and he's stabbed in the leg. That's his song.
Great.
It's not very good.
You're gonna.
Rough
I mean,
draft.
we've done this twice now. How do you not have a good song by now?
I didn't try last time.
Oh, all right. Well, maybe you should stick with the not trying. Go on.
Benji, what was your favorite thing?
Yeah, so Bev catching on quick that it was controlling her father, and it's only because he let it in. Her figuring that whole scene, as I said, it's one of the toughest reads I have, but it's also a great insight into her quickness and just wherewithal, as we had said, to realize what was going on and what needed to be done.
I very much agree with both of those. I would probably have picked one or both of those as my favorite thing as well. I'm going to give a bit of an honorable mention to the complex that Bev goes through in her head of the I hated him, but I loved him too. Just not being able to completely let go of the fact that that's your dad, but he's awful, and it just the blind love that she always had for him. Her struggling with that, I think, is just really, really well written. So that will wrap us up for this actual production of this section. Hopefully it recorded. We'll see. Fingers crossed, right? Let's make this not rehearsal number 2, dress rehearsal number 2. But you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at FloatsDownHere. Check us out what we have going on there. Cool stuff. FloatsDownHere@gmail.com is where you can send your digital balloons to let us know what you're thinking. Check out this show and all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com on your favorite podcatcher, and check out our website too, thepodcastthat.com, where we have cool support us pages with TeePublic store to get t-shirts and stickers and all sorts of fun laptop cases. You can get a Floats Down Here emblem on any of those items, and you can also use our Amazon affiliate link. Anything you buy there, we get a nice little kickback from Amazon, so definitely click on those links and check that out. Subscribe, like, rate, and leave comments on iTunes or on YouTube. That really goes a long way to helping other people find our show. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, this show and all of our shows at thepodcastthat.com are produced with the love and support of our wonderful Imaginary Legion patrons. Learn more about our rewards tier at patreon.com/stayimaginary.
We will see you for the next part of Chapter 19, which is entitled In the Watches of the Night, Part 4. So, Section 4, Kansas Street, 12:20 p.m. Section 5, The Dairy Townhouse, 2 a.m. I can kind of figure out who's going to be there. And Section 6, The Barrens, 12:40 p.m.
You'll float too.
Stay imaginary.
Thanks.